This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman as we continue our special on Kids for Cash. The shocking story of how thousands of children in Pennsylvania were jailed by two corrupt judges who received kickbacks from the builders and owners of private prison facilities. We return to our conversation with some of the people featured in the new documentary Kids for Cash. In this segment, we continue speaking with Lorene Transu, whose daughter Hillary was sentenced to juvenile detention for making a MySpace page that mocked her assistant principal. But first, we turn to Sandy Fonzo. Her 17-year-old son, Ed Kenzikowski, was sentenced to 30 days in a juvenile boot camp by Judge Mark Ciavarella. I began by asking Sandy to describe how her son, Ed, first came to be arrested.
Just a regular, normal, happy life we had. And the summer of his senior year, what would have been his senior year, he started, experimenting a little too, and, sneaking out of the house at night. I knew he was drinking. I always, it was just me and him. So when I did have a problem with him, it was always, I'm going to call your dad and your dad's going to come. But now he's,
He was a star wrestler?
Yeah, star wrestler. I mean, the scouts were all looking at him, many opportunities for scholarships. They were watching him since he was in junior high wrestling for high school. He just had a lot before him, a lot of good. He had a girlfriend at the time that was telling me stuff about him experimenting and, just getting a little bit out of control. I would call his dad, and his dad couldn't do anything anymore. He was this big kid, 6'1", and big muscles. He'd lift all the time, and not doing anything than any other, than what I did at 17 years old either. But he just had so much to lose, and it got to the point that his dad called one day and said, and Ed wasn't home. He's supposed to be home. He's supposed to be in school. And he found out that he was at an underage drinking party, and he had friends that he graduated with that were cops. So he talked to them, and they were going to go in and put some, paraphernalia on him just to get him caught, get him a slap in the wrist, let him, community service, educational program, anything to let him know what, he has just too much to lose. And this is a senior year. He's wrestled since he was 4 years old. And so that's what happened. They went and got him, and they took him in. He sat too.
They planted drug paraphernalia?
Marijuana
in his
pipe.
truck?
Yes. And so,
a marijuana pipe.
Right. And so, I get the call that he's down at the police station. Juvenile court isn't until Tuesday, so for the weekend he had to stay in jail. Tuesday comes along, and now all along, we're talking to the probation people. We're talking actually to the judge also. There was a sit down with these cops and knowing Judge Ciavarella that this was all, in his best interest, just to get him a little slap on the wrist, wise him up, scare him straight. He's a great kid. He has a great future ahead of him. And yep, we know there's, nothing you have to worry about. We don't need a lawyer. The same story. You got off the elevator and they were there. Do you have a lawyer? No, we were told we don't need one. Okay, sign. And that was it. I don't know. I was just very naive, and I was never in my wildest dreams would I think these people that are supposed to have, they were the professionals. They have your child's interests at best at heart, and these are the people that you trust, and everything's going to be okay. He's going to learn a little lesson and everything will be fine. And we stood there, and in 30 seconds he was cuffed and shackled and taken away. And that was the worst feeling. Seeing him turn and look at me like, what's going on? There was nothing I could do. That's frozen into my psyche for the rest of my life, that look that was on his face. They took him to the PA childcare and said that he would be there until he got this psychological evaluation, which we all know was Judge Conahan's son-in-law, brother-in-law. Yeah, that was doing these psychological evaluations. Well, it was a whole 30 days.
The other judge who ended up being convicted.
The president judge that made Judge Ciavarella the juvenile justice judge, yeah. So he sat in there for 30 days, got his psychological evaluation.
Were you able to see him?
Yes, you were allowed on certain days and certain times to go see him and talk to him, and he wanted nothing more. Mom, I know, this was so stupid. I just want to get back. I've missed so much wrestling practice. This is my senior year. All he wanted to do was get back to school. I had letters from the teachers, letters from the judges, or I'm sorry, from the coaches, in lieu of Ed's character of what a great kid he was, sent to the judges' chambers. And anyway, we had to go. So we're going now for 30 days, and I thought to myself, okay, this was good. He sat there, he got his head together, he wants to get back to school, everything's good. Well, we went and stood back in front of that judge, and he was shackled and cuffed and taken to a boot camp out in, it was Northwestern Boot Academy, an hour away from our house. Total military. They couldn't speak. They couldn't do anything. They were dressed in military attire. He was with, people from all over that committed when he would tell me the crimes that were committed, this is who my son was in with. They broke you down, tore you apart, humiliated you. He wouldn't tell me what happened when he was in there.
How long was he sentenced to Judge
3
Chivarella?
months. He went in there for 3 months, and then from there, because Chivarella said he had a drug problem, then he would have to go to Clearbrook, which was, a rehabilitation for addictions. By the time my son got there, if he ever did have a problem with drugs or alcohol, he was never treated because they said this kid has spent so much time already, we can't even keep him. So then he was just released and thrown back out. Get back to your life. No school, because they gave him that amount of schooling in there, so he never got to go back to his high school, never got to wrestle. He was a mess when he came out of there. He
lost all chance of scholarship.
He wouldn't talk about what happened in there.
How long had he been altogether now in jail?
3, 4. He was 1 month there, 3 months there, and 5 months approximately. But he came out of there a changed person. Like I said, he was a 17-year-old free-spirited boy, and he came out a hardened man that wouldn't even talk about what in. So to this day, I don't know what happened to him in there, but he would never talk about it. But he was just a different person. He very bottled up. Wouldn't speak. No respect for the justice system at all. He knew he was wronged. He knew what was taken away. He lost his little girlfriend while he was in there. She left him for somebody, He just lost, in that age, at that impressionable late age, way too much. He had way too much taken from him, everything he had, really. And he ended up getting into a fight. Why he was still on probation, so he would have to go in front of Judge Chivarella again. And now Chivarella takes him for 4 months and sends him to his other facility out in the PA Child Care in Western Pennsylvania for 4 months now. Loses his job, loses everything again. And the people that work there couldn't understand why this almost 20-year-old is doing in this juvenile facility. Nobody understood, but he came out of there, and that was it. He ended up in a fight, which he had to go into, and the fight that he did get into, that we took to adult court, was thrown out. There was just a fight between 2 kids. It was nothing. But Chivarella, 4 months, he went to that his other facility that they were receiving profit for, and that was it. He got into the fight. He was sentenced to a state prison for it, and he came out. He lasted for almost 5 months, and then that's it.
And he shot himself.
Yeah, in his heart.
We're talking to Sandy Fonzo. She is talking about her son, Ed Kenzakowski, who took his own life after an ordeal that lasted years, when he ended up originally in the court of Judge Chivarella. In the midst of what you were saying, Sandy, you said you came to know that Judge Chivarella was now being investigated, even though your son, Ed, would continue to be his victim. That takes us back to Lorraine Transu now, because when Hillary was taken away from you in shackles, you started to investigate the judge yourself. explain what happened, or at least take some action yourself.
So in the beginning, it was all about my daughter. So I don't know that any of this other stuff is going on. What happened is when they finally let me go from the room I was in immediately following the hearing, they allowed me, actually they called my husband using my phone, and it was cold, very cold that day for April, and they sat me outside the courthouse in a metal chair and told me I was not allowed to come back in. So as I sat there, I'm like, but I don't know anything. Like, where is she? Where's my information? And they handed me a business card from the probation department with a man's first name on the back of it and told me that that's who I should contact. But I had no idea who that was. So my husband came and picked me up. But you're really in a state of shock when this happens, because it's so ridiculous. So just you can't fathom it. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. So that first afternoon, my father and my stepmother came. My mother was calling me. They kept saying to me she had to have done something more. There has to be more to this. And I'm like,
more than
really,
a MySpace page.
Yeah, like, and I'm like, no, really, like,
making fun of her assistant principal.
I said, there really is nothing else. And so I just cried and cried and cried and cried. And finally my father said to me, this is not they call me Lori in my family. He says, this is not the Lori I know. She wouldn't just sit here and give up. And I'm like, but Dad, this is a judge. Like, what am I going to do? He goes, well, you're going to fight. So I called the name on the back of the card, and it turned out it was a public defender in our county. And he laughed at me when I said, you have to file an appeal. This is insane. He goes, Chivarella doesn't allow appeals. So I'm like, are you telling me that we can't appeal, or just that it's pointless, or it's not allowed? Like, what are you saying? He goes, well, it's pointless, but Chivarella wouldn't even like schedule it for you. I'm like, okay. So I called the public defender's office in Harrisburg. Pennsylvania's a Commonwealth, so things run a little bit differently in a Commonwealth. I called the public defender's office.
In the capital, Harrisburg.
In the capital, and they told me, well, no, of course juveniles can have appeals, but we're not getting involved in a county matter. Okay, so I called the governor's action line, and they were like, oh, we'll make note of this. I said, well, who else can I call? Try the ACLU. So I called the ACLU, I explained the situation. They said, absolutely, you have a case here. She had a right to put whatever she wants on MySpace, especially a parody, and she put a disclaimer that that's what it is, and we'd be happy to take that case, but we're not going to get involved in this county placement thing and custody. And I'm like, but now what do I do? Well, we have some other numbers, one of which was a woman at Rutgers in New Jersey. So I was like, okay, I'm a Jersey girl, maybe I'll get lucky there. So I called there, and the woman was so sympathetic, and she said, listen, I know somebody, a friend of mine works at Juvenile Law Center in Philadelphia, and since you're in Pennsylvania, maybe they can help you. So I called Juvenile Law Center, and I kind of gave them the information, and the person I spoke to, his name was Laval, and he was very, very soft-spoken, not excitable at all. So I didn't know how to read him, and he said that he would check with Marcia Levick, who was the head of the Juvenile Law Center, and find out if they could take Hillary's case. So I said, okay, and he would call me back. Well, the next day, he hadn't called me back, and so my father said, you give me that number, and he called him. The next thing I know, they were calling me, saying, yes, they were willing to take the case, but not for me. They would not be my attorney. They represent children, and they would represent Hillary as long as I was agreeable and Hillary was agreeable. Would it be okay if they met with her? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And I said, listen, just let me know how much I have to pay, because like I do have a house. I don't have much equity, but I can get some loans and get some money together. And they're like, no, I don't think you understand. We're here for children. We want to help your daughter. Don't worry about any of that. I said, okay. So they went and saw Hillary, and for the first time we had hope. I still couldn't see her for 3 weeks. I was allowed a 1-minute phone call.
You could not see your 15-year-old daughter for 3 weeks?
No.
1 minute, 60 seconds?
Yes. That first phone call was the two of us sobbing hysterical, both apologizing to the other. It was a conversation of, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry, Mom. No, Hill, it's my fault. I'm so sorry. That was our 1 minute, and then it was over. And then the next week, I think we got 5 minutes, and the next week was 8 minutes.
It was just 8 minutes.
But somebody is there listening, and if she started to talk about anything to do with the lawyer and getting out of there, they cut her off.
I want to fast forward to 2011. Judge Chiavarella is charged, tried, and convicted. It's 8 years after Sandy Fonzo's son first was confronted by the judge and sent away. And so after Judge Chiavarella is convicted, Sandy Fonzo, who's now lost her son, Ed Kenzikoski, he shot himself in the heart, she confronts the judge.
This is not a cash for kids case, and we hope somebody
it
starts
wasn't?
getting
Because my kid's not here anymore. My kid's not here. He's dead because of him. He ruined my life. I'd like him to go to hell and rot there forever.
Man, come on.
No, you know what he told everybody in court? They need to be held accountable for their actions. You need to be. Do you remember me? Do you remember me? Do you remember my son? An all-star wrestler? He's gone. He's got himself in the heart. You scumbag!
Talk about that, Sandy. What happened? You were there for his trial?
I planned on being, and then when it came up, I couldn't get myself to go and sit there and look at him and hear the lies, and I kept myself away until the day of the guilty, you know, when he was found guilty. I wanted to be there. I was actually working, and I kept getting messages from everybody that he's found guilty of this, he's found guilty of that, you know, and I'm having a panic attack, and they're going to take him, they're going to shackle him, and they're going to take him, and he's going away today. So I was a mess by now, an emotional train wreck, and everybody at work was like, go. I just wanted to be there. I wanted to see him come out of there in shackles, and I wanted to see him go away. And I don't know how I got myself there. Somehow I drove myself there. Nobody knew I was there, and everybody thought I was at work. I don't remember the ride at all. I just ended up there, and I heard why I'm standing out there. I learned that he is not. He's going to be released to his daughter's custody, and that he won't be going to jail. So, you know, I just lost all hope again. You know, it always seems like you're just let down all the time. And they were going to do a press release, and he was coming out with his lawyer, Al Flora,
to do a press conference, right, on the steps of the courthouse. On the steps
of the courthouse. So when he was coming, I just went with all of the media and everybody that was there, and I was just there, and I had no idea. But when they started, this was not Kids for Cash. I just lost it. I don't remember what I said. I don't remember what came out of my mouth. All I know is that all I remember is being, taken across the street after that, and that's all I remember.
That was Sandy Fonzo. Her son, Ed Kenzikoski, committed suicide after years in and out of jail. He was first sentenced at the age of 17 by Judge Mark Chiavarella. When we come back, we'll speak with the lawyer who helped hold the judges accountable and the director of the new film that tells the story, Kids for Cash. Stay with us.